Side note for today's video, this video is going to be talking about sexuality and minor sexual related stuff. If that does not make you comfortable, then I suggest this video might not be the best for you. Doesn't get too NSFW, just mentions sex a lot. So yeah, I hope you enjoy! Happy Ace Awareness Week, everyone! I hope you guys are having a great October. My birthday is this month and Halloween is coming up. And although this month exactly hasn't been the greatest for me, I hope you guys are enjoying your spooky season. And if the scary things are not your vibe, then I hope you're enjoying the chill autumn season and getting your pumpkin-themed whatever you're into. As you can probably guess from the very first line of this video, as well as when it is being posted, it's Asexual Awareness Week, and I want to talk about my experience and story leading up to my ace identity. But first, this video's art. Podcasting has given me a ton of ace characters I adore, so this is a drawing of canonical asexual podcast characters who are really going through it. We have Jonathan Sims from the Magnus Archives, Sister Carpenter from the Silt Verses, Daughter Dooley from Old Gods of Appalachia, and Jared Hell from Jar of Rebuke. Go check out these shows, they're all really good. Now let's talk about asexuality. So first I'm going to run through a couple of definitions, just for anyone who's watching this who may not know what asexuality is. Someone who is asexual is someone who experiences no sexual attraction. On the romantic ends of things, we also have aromantic, or someone who doesn't experience romantic attraction. Asexuality and aromanticism also exists on a spectrum, ranging to other identities under this umbrella, like gray asexuality or demisexuality. There are also asexuals who are sex repulsed, like me, and asexuals who are sex positive. So they have sex even though the attraction isn't there. Asexuality is not the same as celibacy, and exists on a spectrum, and anyone who is on it can identify in any way they want to, and asexuals who do have sex are just as valid as those who don't. There are asexual people who are also aromantic, and asexual people who are not. For me, my identity leads towards being gray aromantic, but I label my romantic attraction as just being queer for my own reasons. It's easy for me to label it as such, rather than trying to explain the nuances of my attraction to someone who doesn't understand my whole gender thing going on, and why I personally don't want to use certain other LGBT labels to describe my attraction. Why I choose to label myself romantically has changed over the years, but my asexual identity was never one I really doubted. Even before I knew I was asexual, because from a very young age, I knew I wasn't heterosexual. Now, my childhood is really weird, because growing up as a closeted queer kid, for me, was weird, because although I grew up in an environment where my family never talked about anything LGBT related, nobody in my family ever said anything negative about being queer. Like, ever. I didn't know being gay was a thing until I was in middle school, and nobody's ever really said anything negative about it until after I came out. Which, at least for the rest of my family knowing, was sometime after I realized I was queer. So knowing about homophobia in your own family is very interesting in your late teens, early adult years. So growing up, I never was told anything was bad about being gay, but I also was never told what being gay was, or that it was an option. My family only ever rarely went to church. I grew up as Catholic, even though I personally am agnostic, and I never really paid attention to what the pastor said because I was just a little child who didn't understand why we had to go to church. My family never discussed or made snide remarks about anything that could be considered part of a culture war to me, despite coming from some pretty conservative Republican family. Maybe someone in my life might have said something around me before, but nothing I remember now or registered as homophobic back then. It wasn't until middle school, when I met a friend of mine, who I'm still friends with now, that I find out what being both gay and bisexual was, and later on also what being transgender was. And my first reaction to learning about queer people was, oh, I must be bisexual because I think girls are pretty, and I left it at that. 13-year-old Daryl was too busy thinking about warrior cats in The Walking Dead to be thinking about their romantic interests. Of course, being a middle schooler sucked, and throwing around gay and lesbian as an insult was popular back then. But I was bullied pretty much by everyone in all but one of the schools I went to, starting from 4th grade until the end of middle school. And for so many different things about myself, I got bullied for my dead name, I got bullied for, quirks of mine, I got bullied for reading. It is just, middle schoolers are the worst. So I moved around a lot when I was a new kid, and so I often was the new kid. So I guess it was just easy for people to bully me, even though it doesn't make it okay, and if people are bullying you, you should sock them in the face, but that's just me. So naturally, people calling me queer slurs and calling me a lesbian or gay as an insult was a thing, But I was so used to being bullied, I didn't realize they were being homophobic, literally until I was thinking back to those years as an adult. If that tells you about how oblivious to a lot of stuff I was as a child, yeah. But I was just so used to being bullied, and I knew I knew I was being bullied. I just didn't know it was homophobia. Because I didn't know that was a thing until maybe late high school. Which, like I said, I was a very oblivious child to those kind of things. So I was just, yeah, it was a lot. So I moved to a new state in school after that, and I just turned 15 and I started high school, and it was around that time I found out what being asexual was. And I don't remember the exact thing that was happening when I found out about asexuality. I wasn't on Tumblr in my early years on the internet, and in fact, I didn't have regular access to the internet until I was 16, almost 17. I wasn't even on Tumblr during the heydays or the time period where it was a thing where people would go on the internet to attack asexuals. But I knew that as soon as I heard the term asexuality and what it was, it just clicked like a fucking light switch. The reason why people making remarks about my body made me uncomfortable, why my relatives constantly suggesting that the newest guy friend I was hanging out with was my boyfriend, though it could also be because I haven't realized I wasn't interested in dating men yet either, and why I was bewildered when people my age talk about sexual stuff they want to do, and worse, when they ask me what sexual stuff I want to do. It was because I was asexual, and I was satisfied with that, and I went on with my life. Now, I was closeted after I realized I was asexual, but not because I didn't want to make an attempt to come out, or that I didn't feel safe to come out. Like I said, my family never really talked about queer stuff with me, and any queer topics that ever came up was just with my friends. And at this point, I was being aware of what homophobia was, which is upsetting to me, but I was being aware of it. But I never really felt unsafe being a queer person in my home. And it wasn't until over a year later that I learned more about queer issues in the real world after I realized I was ace. And because I didn't think of it as a big thing I had to do, I didn't know about coming out as queer was a big thing. And of course later it's a whole different thing. But I didn't think that was something I really had to do because I was I'm ace. That's it. That's my identity. And I'm lucky that I get to live in an area in an environment that's pretty accepting of people when it comes to different romantic and sexual and gender identities other than cis and straight. But it wasn't until I was 17 when I was thinking more seriously about my romantic identity and whether or not I was really biromantic or something else. Did I actually officially come out? This also was the same year I came out as agender, but I didn't come out to my family as that until the very end of the year. As I grew up, I did revisit my own sexuality and had my what if I'm not this moments, such as when I realized I actually have no interest in dating men, but my asexual identity has never been questioned outside of maybe once in a while for the first couple years after I'd started thinking more seriously about my romantic identity, when I would briefly think, am I actually asexual? Then I would think about having sex for a millisecond before going, gross, yeah, I'm still sex repulsed. I'm sorry, I don't get the appeal of it, and I think it's gross, and NSFW on TV, on my TV shows, gross. It's gross. It's there, not for me, but it's gross. Now I'm a grown adult, and I can say I've been happily asexual for my whole life, although I've only been knowing what to call myself for the last 10 years. I've been pretty open about being an agender queer ace person, and for the most part, I'm lucky to have most people in my life be okay with that. I have a great girlfriend now, and friends and family who love me, even may not understand my identity all the time. I'm happy and I'm glad that I could talk about my own experiences as an asexual person. However, I do wish we could see more ace representation in more mainstream media. There's some exceptions, like Todd Chavez from BoJack Horseman, who's an amazingly well-written asexual character. His identity isn't treated as a joke, and I appreciate that in the show's comedy, especially since BoJack Horseman is a comedy, and I think they treat it as just They treat it with such sincerity that it makes the doki dokis. The amount of online takes from asexuals who make asexuality seem like a joke is ugh. And on the other hand, as much as I love him, you get bad rep in mainstream media like Daryl Dixon from The Walking Dead. I didn't know he was asexual until years after I fell out of watching the show, when I found the original interview where it was confirmed that he was. But please, if you're going to confirm something like that for your most popular character in your show, can you please at least do something with it? The storyline about a character exploring their queer identity during the zombie apocalypse would have been so interesting, and it sucks so bad they didn't do anything with it. Indie projects have a lot of asexual rep, and a lot of it is written so well. One of my favorite webcomics, Cast Off, has an almost entirely asexual cast, and I already listed a bunch of characters from podcasts that I listen to that includes asexual main protagonists. Jonathan Sims' Sister Carpenter, my beloveds, I love you both so much. I could go on a whole discussion about asexual writing in podcasts versus in mainstream media. I even based my final essay I did on my previous semester at school on it. It was for a critical sexuality class. And also I included the inclusion of aromantic representation in media as well, since aromantic characters are severely underrepresented in media. If you watched this far, you folks out there who might not have listened to the Silverses or Old Gods of Appalachia should know that Sister Carpenter and Daughter Dooley are both aro-ace. Just if you're looking for a new show to listen to, I did videos on both. You should go watch them. And of course, I include asexual characters in my own personal work, because if I'm going to be disappointed by my previously favorite zombie show, I'm going to write my own rep. In my comic The Shepherd of Oblivion, my main protagonist, Susie Wiles, is an aromantic asexual trans girl. Another character we were introduced to early on in the story, Lancer, a goat wolf man who lives in the woods with his fellow bandit friends, is gray asexual. Even in my other project, In Harmony, queer platonic partners Meredith Sims and Nemesis Henderson are both asexual. However, Meredith himself is sex repulsed and Nemesis is sex positive. It's important to me to write about asexuality being a spectrum, especially when non-aces like to insist that if you're not celibate, you're not ace. And that's coming from a sex repulsed asexual who thinks sex is really gross. Remember, again, celibacy is not the same as being asexual, and if someone who's asexual enjoys having sex, then it doesn't make them any less ace. That just does about it for this video. If you like the art, consider following me, whether you subscribe to me here on YouTube or any of my other social media linked below. They're all here for you. Stick around for news about In Harmony's release date, or go read The Shepherd of Oblivion right now. We're currently up to chapter 3 on that comic and it's easy to catch up. Thanks for watching, and I hope to talk to you again soon.